Hey everyone, welcome to You'll Probably Agree. And today I have two guests on. One, he's kind of like my former, or he's kind of like the guy we talk about like nerdy stuff like gaming and South Park with, and that's Rob Kojder from the Flickering Myth. And with me is my other friend Jeff York from the Establishing Shot. If you need someone to draw awesome illustrations of a movie or someone, hire Jeff. Maybe Trey and Matt should reach out to you for some illustrations. So having said that, today is a not safe for work conversation because we are talking about two guys, really three if you include Pam Brady, who's one of the writers on the film that we'll talk about. We're talking about South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, a movie that was a pretty big deal when it came out. It didn't make a ton of money. It was like made on an 18 to $20 million budget, and it made about like 81 domestically. I don't know what it made internationally. But it was like the first animated R-rated film to hit the theaters. And the one that followed it that ended up making more money was Sausage Party, because Americans are stupid, I guess. And there goes my audience. But no, we're going to go around the room, and I'll finish with me. But Jeff, why don't we start with you? Give us a synopsis of the film, and then tell me what you thought of it.
Sure. Well, sort of picking up on a lot of the themes and the ideas, including the characters, of course, from the South Park television series on Comedy Central. This one finds again our famous foursome of kids: Stan, Kyle, Eric, and Kenny, who are obsessed. Are obsessed. Did I say? I thought I said Carmen. Oh, yeah, Carmen. Yeah, Carmen. But they're obsessed. It starts already. They're obsessed with a Canadian comedy duo named Terrence and Phillip, and they are starring in a new movie that the boys all want to go see, but it's an R-rated movie. So they have to sort of finagle their way in there. And of course, because it's R-rated and has lots of swearing and dirty jokes and just all kinds of raucous, social behavior, if you will, antisocial behavior, they come out of the show obsessed with it, start quoting it, and get in trouble at school and in their homes by quoting Terrence and Phillip and their dirty talk. And this all builds to a moral panic in the United States, saying that basically Canada is to blame for the moral shortcomings of our youth in America. And it turns into a big sort of epic cartoon show, if you will, something that David Lean might have done if he was an animator.
Yeah, it really has an old Hollywood feel to it. But yeah, go ahead.
But of course, the ultimate point of the movie, and I think the point of at the time, as well as why you're doing it today, is it's really all about the idea of censorship and trying to get in the way of what artists can say and do. As it was then, it was a repeated problem that Trey Parker and Matt Stone and Pam Brady had when they were dealing with censors, even on Comedy Central. So it's even more so today with, the whole idea of comedy going too far to some and, then sort of getting canceled, et cetera, et cetera. But at the time, they decided to sort of retaliate against all those critics, the Karens, the Carmen's moms of the world, by doing a movie that right in the title, they're letting you know they're going for it. The title's a dick joke. It's hilarious. And yet they got away with that in every single paper in the country, hats off to them for putting it right there in the title and everywhere else in the film. And here we are talking about it. That was in 1999. Here we are so many years later, decades later, and we're still having the same discussion as these guys were having to have with the powers that be then. So yeah, everything old is new again. And South Park is still on television. So there you go.
Yeah, very good. Rob, what did you think of the film? Did you see it in 99 when it came out, or was it later?
There are 3 points I want to follow up on that Jeff said. Well, he said that the movies, obviously, they're obsessed with Terrence and Phillip, this R-rated comedy duo they wanted to see the movie for. I was 10 when I saw this movie, so I very much resonated with a lot of what those kids liked and why they wanted to see that movie. And also, Mike, you mentioned that the box office was so-so for this movie. I think more importantly, I'm almost positive this film was nominated for an Oscar for
Yeah, it
Best
was.
Original Song,
And,
which
Yeah.
might be even more important.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Playing
yeah,
Canada.
yeah, it was. Yeah. But yeah, aside from that, I think the movie's hilarious.
Mhm.
And Jeff, you mentioned they were pushing back against censorship. That's something they might have to do again because me and
Mhm.
Mike were talking about this the other day that Paramount Plus wants to censor some of the episodes that they're putting on their streaming service.
Yeah.
And some of their
so
choices
sad.
make no sense.
Yeah, there was something I sent to you guys in the comment section, and it was from 2 deleted episodes, 200 and 201, where they show the Prophet Muhammad, but he's, like, censored, and then there's, like, a whole speech at the end about what they learned, and the whole thing is bleeped by Comedy Central, but, you know, pirated versions on YouTube have it. But I'm sorry, Jeff, you were gonna say something. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say Rob is absolutely right. In fact, it's kind of incredible, and yet Paramount Plus may be as good a studio as they are, creating many great shows, including this one. If they don't understand it, they need to look no farther than what happened to Tim Cook today, after he gives $1 million of his own money to the Trump administration, thinking he's going to be taken care of, and now they're wanting him to make iPhones here in the States at about $3,500 a pop. So I don't know what the purpose, the upside of Paramount cutting all this to sort of carry favor with, sort of the climate that we've got right now. This show has been available in reruns forever and a day on Comedy Central without having to make these edits that they want. It's unfortunate. By the way, I don't know if you want to hear it now, but there are supposedly 2 cuts in this that were the final holdouts that they had to make to get an R rating, because originally when they took this to the MPAA, they wanted to give it an NC-17 rating. Yeah. But we can talk about that later as we get into the story, because they're pretty funny cuts.
Yeah. The funniest thing is that, like, the MPAA would say, hey, you can't put that in the movie. So then Trey Parker and Matt Stone would then come back with something even worse. And then the MPAA was like, oh, yeah, this is okay. Which it, like, just shows how much of big hypocrites they are. I remember when I saw this movie, I was like 13 years old, going on 14. And my dad took me to see it in a movie theater that doesn't exist anymore, that I saw a lot of classics in. And I remember, like, right when they started with Uncle Fucker, I just started laughing my ass off. And the movie, like, I don't like musicals, but this film worked really well as a musical because Trey Parker and Matt Stone, they have an amazing music talents. Like, if you've ever heard their stuff from their band DVDA, like I Am Chewbacca or Now You're a Man, which they play in Orgasmo, like, they're catchy songs. And of course, they ended up years and years later doing Book of Mormon, which won a ton of Tonys. And yeah, nobody was expecting the movie to be a musical. It wasn't marketed that way, and it was intentionally done that way. And when we got some of the tunes, they were pretty catchy. And here's a sample of some of them. This is a 29-second clip. This is the only one, so don't worry, I'm not going to pause everyone all the time. So yeah, let's see what some of these songs are. It's not all of them, but like for the first half of the movie, it's most of them.
Just another Sunday morning in my quiet mountain town. Shut your fucking face, Uncle Fucker. You're a cocksucking ass licking Uncle Fucker. You have met my friend cause mom's the biggest bitch in the whole wide world. To me no business, yes, doing hers is a big. Right Canada, right Canada. For the beady little eyes, flapping heads, some more lies. Right Canada.
Just like you were saying, Jeff, this movie goes for it. They're like, because originally when this film was going to come out, I didn't know this until I did my research. I guess like season 2 of South Park, they thought they were going to get canceled. The ratings weren't as good. The reviews weren't as good. They were kind of like used to getting bad reviews for everything they did, from Cannibal, the musical, to Basketball, to Orgasmo. And then they thought, oh, this is going to get bad. It comes out, it actually gets very good reviews, and the audiences like it. And the main takeaway I took from that movie was, I remember I left the film, and my dad, who like went with me, he wasn't like, oh, this is raunchy or anything, because my dad was always like a very kind of like open-minded kind of guy. Like, he watched Oz in front of me when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not, not the Wizard of Oz. We're talking about Prison of Oz.
The HBO Oz.
Yeah. followed by G-string divas. So
Oh,
every
well, there
time
you
I
go.
was at family parties, I would say just a little bit closer, and my dad would drag me away and say, "Don't sing that to me." But he left the movie and he said, "I really liked it because it was about how censorship and politically correct culture is hypocritical, and how it can lead to people actually getting hurt." And it sort of says like, at what point do we draw language where it's hurting people and our censorship is just kind of limiting everything that we say, to where maybe there should be some censorship on stuff? Like when you look at Trump, like there's somebody who should be censored, but at the same time, he wants to censor everybody who says something that goes against his best interests. Why do you think this movie has like lived on for years and years and years after it's come out and has been widely remembered? And surprisingly, Trey and Matt thought that was their fuck you to Hollywood and their exit from everywhere. And it actually, South Park's still on the air, 26 seasons. So yeah. Well, what's this everlasting impact?
Go ahead, Rob.
Okay. Well, I'd say its everlasting impact is that it's still funny to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's amusing that you say it's a fuck you to Hollywood, which it is, but the movie does have cameos from like George Clooney in it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you could argue that some of those Hollywood people do agree with Trey Parker and Matt Stone on a number of things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as you said, we're still talking about this stuff today. More things like censorship is still an issue. You just talked about it. And you brought up Donald Trump. And there is someone who should be censored because the things he says are actively looking to hurt like other people, marginalized communities, all that stuff. South Park has always struck me as not necessarily punching down or up. It's just sort of funny, and it, like there is no bias. Like they will attack anyone or anything. Like as long as it's funny, that's what they will do. And there's no like real harm behind it.
Yeah, very well said.
I think it's a great point. I think they are equal opportunity offender, if you will. Although
yes, that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, that's good. And certainly some of the things they've done since then, whether it's the Book of Mormon or Team America, were sort of indicting some of the people. George Clooney was one of them who got, satirized pretty heavily in that puppet movie, as it was known. But
later in South Park with the Oscar speech, smug clown.
Right, exactly, exactly. I think it's also just stood the test of time because I think sometimes animated things last because they aren't as sort of aged in look. I mean, the characters all stay the same. They're all the same age. It's like The Simpsons as well. It's like why I think Bugs Bunny was popular in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s. And even when they were getting better animated sort of versions of them and stuff, is it still essentially the same characters, the same sense of humor and stuff like that? And that becomes timeless, but it also doesn't necessarily get married to like the turn of the century here, as this one did, or centuries or decades past, as Bugs and some of those other cartoon classics are. I also think, to Rob's point, this is just damn funny. It's always funny, and they're making fun of kids. They're making fun of culture. They're making fun of small town America. They're making fun of parental double standards, and very often, sort of what's trending in the news or popular and stuff like that, which gives it a sort of like, oh, let's see what they're doing now. There was a time where you could turn into a episode of South Park, and within 2 or 3 weeks of a news item dominating the sort of water cooler discussion, Trey and Matt were making fun of it already on South Park, the way they've got their animation down to and somewhat simplified too, but down to a science. They could react that quickly and be that topical that fast. So I think all those things helped it as well. But at the end of the day, I think they're 4 ridiculous characters, but they're also lovable. I mean, look at all the merchandise that has been sold all the world on that. I mean, stickers and stuffed plush toys and hundreds of other things. Probably launched 1,000 memes, and people quote it still to this day. And it's got an avid following that does very well still for Comedy Central. So it's like The Simpsons. There's something about it that is appealing on all those levels that just keeps it going and going and going.
Yeah, and one thing that, like, really ages well with it is, like, if you watch other cartoons from the '90s or I don't know when Family Guy came around, but, and South Park did a great job at ripping on Family Guy in one
Yes.
episode, but yeah, uh,
And The Simpsons, don't forget that.
oh, yeah, yeah,
Simpsons did
Simpsons
it.
did it, Simpsons did
Yes.
it, yeah, like, South Park, like, it doesn't just rely on current pop culture news to deliver punchlines. It's not like
Oh, I'm
Family
sorry to cut
Guy.
you off, but that
Yeah.
episode is one of the banned ones. The Simpsons did it. That's
They
one of the
banned
banned
it?
ones on Paramount Plus. Yeah,
Why?
I
Like, that
don't know
one's not even
why.
that bad. Yeah, it must
Right.
be the Simpsons creators. I mean, and here's the thing, over the years, I think South Park ended up aging better than The Simpsons because The Simpsons was good up until Matt Groening left as a writer. He stayed as a showrunner, but he just kind of collects a check, and once he left as a writer, that show became worse and worse and worse, and I don't know a single person who watches The Simpsons today, but yet it's still on the air. And South Park,
Sorry to
people
cut you
still,
off again, but
yeah.
same thing for Family Guy too. As soon as Seth
Mm,
MacFarlane left, the writing team went downhill.
I didn't know he did that.
I think
Wow.
that they still have certain people who still watch it probably out of loyalty, but also it gets sort of reinvented for each new generation. Like when I was well past The Simpsons, as far as sort of them as being the water cooler kind of show. My nieces were into it, and it was something that younger people, I think, tend to discover. And this is maybe their first introduction, just like Mad Magazine was for me when I was a kid, a few decades before you kids. But Mad Magazine was really sort of a big deal. And then, Saturday Night Live came about, and then other satire shows, and then, The Simpsons and South Park were two of the big ones. And then The Family Guy, I guess, was kind of the last one in a way that did a lot of the same kinds of things. But I also think that this one has something that the other two, maybe if I dare say, have lost a little bit. And that is they keep the focus on the four characters. It's still about these kids who are, sort of battling with their place in the world, their place with each other. They fight like kids do, but they also are sort of shocked at the world around them. And they're kind of a little more innocent. I think part of the problem with The Family Guy and The Simpsons is they stop becoming as much of sort of recognizable family characters and anything goes kind of stuff. I mean, they threw so many celebrities at The Simpsons and so many outlandish plots. And then, of course, the problem I think with The Family Guy is, as funny as it is in many respects still, but to your point about MacFarlane leaving is, everything seems like it's a setup for a cutaway. This reminds me, Lois, of that one time when you were, a harem girl for, Osama bin Laden. And then they cut to this wild little 10-second bit that's maybe funny, but it's like, what?
Family Guy really started to overdo that as soon as it became popular.
It's and that made it popular at the time, but the farther afield they got, I think the more they lost touch with kind of the core characters and the reality of it. I know that's crazy to say when it comes to talking about cartoons, but I think that there was, even as outlandish as some of the plots can get in South Park, there's a reality of these four kids living in their little town. And I think those other shows walked away from similar kind of groundedness.
Yeah, and Trey and Parker.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and oftentimes, for as ridiculous as those plots are, it's the juvenile children who are sometimes more like reasonable or intelligent than the adults.
That's right.
There's a sharpness to the humor and the satire and all the political commentary they're going for.
That's right.
You don't get that in like Family Guy or The Simpsons.
No, they're very one-sided. Like when you watch their stuff, it's either like they hate, the Republicans and they hate Trump, but then they like never really make fun of the liberals and the South Park creators. Like people theorize that they're Republicans or not. I have no idea. I think they just hate everybody. And the great thing about South Park is like you were saying, Jeff, like with something like Family Guy, they'll cut to Peter. He'll say, "You think that's bad? Remember the time I met Gary Oldman?" Cut to Gary Oldman. And he's like, "What you talking about, Pete?" And you're like, "What the fuck does that have to do with the plot?"
It was funny for like one season, and then it became like their whole identity as like a comedy series.
Yeah. Well, and to bring it back a little bit to the movie as well, I think the interesting thing is this movie has a classic sort of cult status, and it's very well regarded. If anything, I think it stands up really well indeed as a musical, and we'll talk a little bit more about that amongst other things. But when The Simpsons made their foray onto the big screen after years and years of talking about doing so, other than computerized animation that made it look a little bit more expensive, and then the show sort of followed suit with that, some of the sets and some of the context of where they are as a city or a locations are much more elaborate than they used to be. It didn't really do anything different or better. It didn't really try to build as much on what they had going on the series already. I don't know if that was just them feeling that they didn't want to give the audience something too different, but this, by being a musical, is very different. And it is a full-blown musical. I mean, they approach it indeed like the structure of musicals are, right down to doing a parody of the opening number where they're singing about their town, which is similar to everything from, for more recent terms, Beauty and the Beast, where they're establishing Belle in her context of her provincial life, to the opening of almost every musical, whether it's something like Rodgers and Hammerstein did, where you're getting a little sense of the location as well, to most musicals always do a big splashy production number. They do that here. I'll throw in one quick thing just to show how incredibly sophisticated this is. There's a term in Broadway called the 11 o'clock number. It's not really regarded as much as sacrosanct anymore, but it used to be the number that came right before the ending that was comedic, whether it was a drama or not. And grant you, in the 40s and 50s, when this term was coined, most musicals are musical comedies. And yet the story still has a sense of drama. The boy and girl have to get together, or some obstacle has to be overcome. So, you've got a little bit of drama right at the end. Well, the 11 o'clock number, which is basically like shows would go a little creep after a little past 11, was a comedy number to let you know that this was still a musical and they still wanted you to laugh, and it was still lighthearted, even though we're going to wrap this up in kind of a serious way in just a few minutes. It was kind of the I can breathe a sigh of relief knowing that it's probably going to be okay, even though it was getting heavy there for a while. They have an 11 o'clock number in South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. It's I'm super. Thanks for asking. We're big gay Al, just does this number out of nowhere that is just saying like, I'm happy and everything's great. And that's kind of the feeling that the 11 o'clock number, of course, was trying to give audiences back in the heyday of musicals in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And they satirize that here. Now, how many kids who are 10 or 12 or whatever, or me, in my early 20s would know that? But there it is. If you get it, you get it. And if you don't, you can look it up. Or if you don't, it's just kind of funny and maybe does the same mental thing on your brain that the 11 o'clock number does in Broadway. But that's something that Stone and Parker and Stone made sure they satirized here. And that's genius.
Yeah. And the movie has like this, because what Trey Parker and Matt Stone were aiming for was they wanted to emulate like the old Disney cartoon musicals. One thing like that struck me was like kind of like old classic Hollywood films, like when Stan's singing about his quiet little mountain town, the camera sort of spins around him while his arms are extended like he's Julie Andrews from The Sound of Music. And it kind of like lets you know right away, oh, this isn't just another episode of South Park.
Right.
This is something different. And the movie was really about, as we were saying, censorship and sort of the consequences when we take coarse language too seriously, and then we take action where we think we're helping our children, but we're not. Like Sheila Broflovsky, Kyle's mom, who's a bitch, by the way. She's like, yeah, she's a bitch, but at the same time, she means well. Like, she doesn't want her children to grow up to be kind of mindless, culturalist vulgarians. She wants them to have a proper education and a proper future, but she takes it too far when she wants to commit war on Canada and, execute Terrence and Phillip. And that just kind of says something about our culture where, like, if we don't agree with something, or if we find something offensive, we do sort of what happened to episodes 200 and 201 of South Park, where it was canceled because they couldn't show the Prophet Muhammad, or even talk about him, or even reference him, or even have a message about the episode to him. And the message to that episode is the same message that they have in this movie, which is if people threaten you with violence, usually they get what they want, but that's not the way to go. But of course, we live in a society where people only kind of listen to violence, and that's kind of like why people gravitated towards Sheila and her sort of like band of angry mothers that were going against the system. And it's always what South Park has been saying for years, which is don't take everything so seriously and be able to have a sense of humor. Don't be like Sean Penn, where if Team America makes fun of you, don't write an angry letter to them because you could look like an idiot. Because like when they made Team America, like Sean Penn in the movie says, I've been to Iraq and it's full of flowers and wonderful things. And then in the letter against Trey and Matt, like at the end, he says, I've been to Iraq. And I Sean Penn. It's like, dude, you're saying exactly what they're making fun of you for. People are complete hypocrites when it comes to foul language, because some of the most foul people, like George Carlin, actually believed in the best things, while, people like Donald Trump, who's also foul, believes in the wrong things. And it's really about language and how we handle it, and really about how we treat our kids. What do we protect them from, and what do we get? Because the ironic thing is that, and Trey Parker Matt Stone said this in the audio commentary, is that this movie is about kids in the beginning going to a movie that's rated R that they can't get into because they know a lot of the audience, like me when I was a kid in the 4th grade, knew, like, I went to a movie that was rated R that I couldn't get into, but did I get hurt at the end of it? No, I was fine. And that I think if everyone didn't, have sort of culture wars over what you could show and what you can't show, and what you could say and what you can't say, we might get together a little better as a society.
By the way, I made a mistake. I was much older than in my 20s in the 1990s. I was old enough to know better, but I went anyway. I think in my late 30s or early 40s. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I think to your point, what Cartman's mom demonstrates here too is that the best intentions of an individual can get ramped up to the ridiculous when it comes to a mob. Yeah. And that's certainly evidence all around us, whether it's in this country or others, where mob mentality ends up oftentimes ruining society.
Yeah. That's sort of exactly what's happening. That's why this movie's so relevant. It came out in 99. It's about mob mentality. And here we are in 2025. And we have people in their own little tribes trying to, who love America, but yet they're tearing it down and they don't even realize it. And it's like a funny tragedy. And I think that's why this movie echoes so well, because like no matter what year you live in, you're always going to be faced against hypocrisy, against censorship, and against tyranny. And this movie has all those little themes in it, and it plays out like a big, theatrical release, which now, ironically, they can make this whole movie within like a couple weeks or a month because of the computers that they use to make the episodes on. Like the Adventureland episode arc is pretty much the size of Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. But it's like, it just goes to show you, like, if you don't write like Seth MacFarlane and make just stupid pop culture jokes, and your movie actually has something to say and is central to the plot and central to the characters, that really works. I especially liked Kenny's plot, where he, because usually he dies and it's a punchline, but here he dies, he goes to hell, and then he redeems himself in the end. Where, oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they even expanded that beyond the TV series, so that was good. But you were going to say something, Rob. I interrupted you earlier to explain my forgetfulness about my age.
I was just going back to what you said about R ratings and parents like restricting what their kids watch. I was going to say, to me, it often came across as laziness of parents not wanting to just have conversations with their children about things, what not to take away from them or what not to say or do. Like just to have conversations about adult themes or whatever's in something R-rated.
Yeah. It brings me back to South Park actually got me in trouble as a kid, because there was this one teaching assistant who was I won't get into foul language about
Did you have a friend whose mom's name was Kyle? Or
I don't know, but this lady was certainly a bitch. And like anyway, but she I wrote an episode of South Park when I was like in middle school, and it had foul language in it. The episode was about like the boys getting bought out by Dimension Films. I think because I saw Scream at the time. That was like my first hard R rated film that I was conscious of. And one day when I wasn't at school, she's looking through the desk. She finds the script, calls my parents, says, "Hey, this show is really bad and it's making your son write these foul things." And my parents didn't let me watch the show for a year. I got them to let me watch it again by showing them the most tame episode of the series. And that was the one where Barbara Streisand turns into a mecha Godzilla and destroys the town. And later my dad took me to see the movie and everything turned out fine. But it's like examples like her. It's like she was like Sheila Broflovsky, incarnates in a real person. And it's like if people like that are working in education where they like want to be overprotective of children, and I get it too. Like you work in education, I've worked in it. Like they are extremely like you got to walk on eggshells over everything. They're very woke. And Bigger, Longer, and Uncut is sort of like a movie that goes against woke culture before woke culture. And I do like woke culture. I think there are people who are marginalized and looked over who now kind of get their time in the limelight. But then there are other people like Dave Chappelle's friend who was transgender. And because she was transgender and because of his material, everyone in her community came after her, causing her to kill herself. And it really shows how the people who want to censor everything the most are the most hypocritical, hateful people that are out there. It's usually the like very religious kind of people who say, well, God loves everyone and don't use foul language. But anyways, we hate gays, Jews, Muslims, blacks, Mexicans, Native Americans, anyone who isn't white. So, it really kind of touched a hot button issue on both sides without even having to say which side it was. Of course, Team America very clearly makes it that they hate, the Hollywood liberal left, but boy, did they predict Alec Baldwin correctly.
I also think, though, that Team America was making fun of the jingoistic right down to the America Fuck Yeah song and the name of it, like these special forces, which
all the Michael Bayisms that are like,
well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Michael Bay. I mean, every movie that's Stallone.
Unironically think that's like a patriotic song, and they
they like
listen
that.
to it all fired up, and they don't get that they're being made fun of.
Like Nixon kept watching Patton when he was trying to be inspired about Vietnam, and George C. Scott famously said at the time that he hoped that he never watched Dr. Strangelove, one of his other big hit movies. But no, you're right. But I think this is interesting too because the cleverness of it. If it was just sort of strident and hitting sort of one note and being a little bit, just irritatingly pious about it, this movie might not have lasted as long or been as popular as it was. But there's so much cleverness going on here. And Mark Shaman, who did the music and has done legitimate musicals like Hairspray. He did the music for the Broadway musical Hairspray, but he's also done special material for the Oscars. I don't know if you remember the song that Jack Black and Will Ferrell sang about how the Academy never honors a clown. And then John C. Reilly stands up in the audience and says, you have to do both kinds of films, dramas, and comedies. Anyway, Mark Shaman is playing the piano in that, and he wrote the song. But there's so much of this in there. And just to highlight the song Blame Canada, the Oscar-nominated Best Song that year, they say things like, and their little beady eyes. Well, everybody in Canada looks Western, right? Because they're almost look like all of everybody in any Western country for that matter. But they say that, and then it's part of their dumb reasoning. And is it any better than saying about somebody's skin or somebody's nose or somebody else's physical bearings that don't make a person? But here they do. And I also think it's funny too that one of the people who gets their wrath in that song is Anne Murray, the famous country music singer from the 70s. She did Snowbird and some other famous songs. She's a big popular artist in the sort of contemporary country music, or whatever you call it. And they say that bitch Anne Marie too, like nobody would ever say a single bad thing about Anne Marie, but they do here. And that's very clever on a number of levels. Not only that, they're looking around for grasping at straws for enemies and picking the most ridiculous, ludicrous people to attack, but also just how the fact is that they do those things in these sort of diatribes and hates and stuff. And yet what makes it even funnier is they put it to music, and it's a really clever lyric.
Yeah, and like the great thing about Trey Parker and Matt Stone and this movie is that they don't care if they offend anybody. They don't care if they offend Hollywood, because they're not like The Simpsons, where they're like, oh, what famous person can we get on our show? It's more like, hey, what famous person can we rip on, and why are we ripping on them? What are we saying? Which, I mean, they even like ripped on, when they ripped on Scientology. Not only did Tom Cruise try to shut down the whole show, but Isaac Hayes, who was Chef, who was a Scientologist, left it as well. And then they made an episode after he left, I don't know how shortly thereafter, where he joins the Super Adventure Club, which is a club of adults who go around and molest children around the world. And they brainwash Chef into doing that. And by the end of the episode, he falls off a bridge, and then like a mountain and a bear like tear him to shreds, and then he shits his pants after he's dead. So it's like they don't care who they piss off, but it's always for a reason. They're not just saying, oh, this is funny, yuck, yuck, yuck. I mean, some of it is like, I mean, there's no
Mike
point
and Rob,
in having...
how about the fact that Satan is actually
a good guy.
The secondary villain here? He's not as bad as Saddam Hussein.
Yeah. Hey, come on, guy. Yeah, like, and it's funny because
he
like,
also has one of the best songs in the movie too.
That's right. I
want to live.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. It's like nobody's really like a one-dimensional character in that movie. Like the kids are just these people, are these little kids who are growing up, who, as you said, Jeff, they're sort of like the voice of reason. Because like when we're kids and we look at adults, we kind of notice and say obvious things that maybe adults don't pick up on because we've been through life and been beaten up, and we don't become quite as observant. And the kids have like a dimension of them that sort of like speaks to what the audience's common sense is telling them and their morality is telling them. And then, you have Sheila, who is sort of like good and bad at the same time. And then Satan, who's sort of good and bad at the same time, where Saddam Hussein is gaslighting him and, making him feel less than. And that's what makes these sort of characters live on for years and years, because they're not just a stupid, like, Gary Coleman cameo from Family Guy. It's like there's actually intention and reason, thought and heart to it. Anyways.
Rob made a good point too, I think, when he said that a lot of times the kids are, smarter or more perceptive, or certainly more earnest. They're untouched by, sort of cynicism as much as humans tend to be. And then they take that as, well, that's maturation. That's how adults are. They tend to see it with a little bit more, dare I say, objective eyes. And I think in some respects, that's true of both Parker and Stone in making this show, because all the stuff that they're referencing so brilliantly, whether it's musicals and again, I mean, we could do a whole hour about how, the various musicals that they've parodied and stuff like that. I mean, even the end of Uncle Fucker, where they spell it out, is the way they end the coda in Oklahoma, which is funny. And how many kids your age would necessarily know that? Well, you guys, I'll bet, did. And so did they, who are a little bit older, obviously, but that was not their generation either, but somehow they were paying attention more to it, and maybe reruns on television, or they obviously went to the theater and like that as much as television movies, and saw the specialness of sort of bringing all that together in this movie. But it's extraordinary. I mean, I remember when The Little Mermaid came out in 1987. I think it was Theater Week magazine said it was probably the best musical of that year, though they gave it to a musical on Broadway. because it was really smart. I mean, the way that musical was written was as a legitimate musical with about 8 songs, which is about probably 5 or 6 less than they would have in a 3-hour Broadway musical, but nonetheless. And this is written that same way, as has all of the, the stuff that has been done in many respects from the Little Mermaid on, with like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and stuff like that. But I mean, they've all taken a page sort of from Howard Ashman and Alan Menken in really writing a legitimate musical, even if it is a big ass cartoon. And that's what Parker Stone and Shaman did here. I mean, all the songs are terrific. I mean, they do that one, the Resistance song, which is very much like, a couple of the songs from Les Mis, and they do, like I said, the 11 o'clock number and some other things. So, the part of your world is when I can change, when, Satan sings I can change. That's those self-reflective songs like, I Am What I Am from La Cage aux Folles, or anything from any musical that there is. And it just, I think, is sort of, like I said, underlying the fact that these young people saw something that was older than them, well before their time, and yet sort of looked at it earnestly, and they bring that sort of sensibility and that kind of respect for it to this show, where the same kind of young eyes are looking at things with much more of an open sort of sense of wonder, and trying to be sort of clear and clean about it, as opposed to, so jaded and awful as adults often can be.
Yeah. Hey, you guys talking amongst each other for 1 second. My lights are constantly flickering. I'll be right back. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Rob, are you a fan of musicals, or how do you feel about them?
So I was actually just going to say, when I was 10 seeing this for the first time, I wasn't like ecstatic that it was going to be a musical, because I was a kid. I didn't like musicals yet. But one of the things that has stuck with me, until today, is how catchy and memorable the songs are. I don't think there's a bad one amongst them. I think they're
agree.
all fantastic.
I agree. And that's...
But to answer your question, now I do like musicals, and I mean, La La Land is still one of my favorite movies of the past 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But I always say to people, when, like Mike, and I'm going to say this to you since you went on record, is I've heard you say it a couple of times now that you don't like musicals. And yet I'll bet you that your very first movie that you loved in this world was a musical. And it's one of the greatest musicals of all time. And that's The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I didn't really quite watch all of Wizard of Oz straight through when I was a kid. But then when I got older, I watched it straight through.
But it's most kids' first musical, at least before maybe The Little Mermaid on that generation on it. But I mean, and that had like 10 songs in it, and very good ones, and a lot of the same clever wordplay and lyrics and stuff here. But it's funny. I think musicals, sometimes when they're sticky or corny, or there's too many songs, and maybe they, I mean, I don't know how they do the Great Gatsby musical. I haven't seen it. I've listened to the album, and it's not bad. But I mean, there's so much inside people's heads that I guess musicals songs being sung sometimes are what is in somebody's head that they just burst out into song with. Doesn't quite work. But to Rob's point, I'm with you. I have not watched this movie in at least a decade. And before I sat down to reacquaint myself with it for this show, I'll bet if you said, Jeff, can you hum the medley or at least some of the lyrics of every one of the songs, I probably could. Now, I grant you, I'm a musical fan. I do love La La Land, Rob. But that's how good the songs are here. And Mark Shaman, it's something to be said for writing melodies that really stick. They really stick against the wall of the brain, and you hear that one time and you say, oh, I recognize that melody. And, it's like a great song that, does the same thing, but whether it's in a musical or not, but they definitely did that here. And that's far beyond anything that anybody is expecting out of this movie. So I think that makes it memorable and great too.
Yeah. And I probably should correct myself. I ended up liking musicals when I got a little older. But like as a kid, you're just like, oh, why are they singing and dancing and they know what they're saying to each other? Well, I will say I need to write an article about movies I changed my mind on, because I don't know if you saw the remake of The Color Purple, which was a musical. Oh my God, the third act is stupid fucking dog shit. I'm sorry, but like Coleman
How do you really
Domingo-
feel, Mike?
well, here's my problem. Coleman Domingo is playing Danny Glover's character from the original, where he's like raping the protagonist, and then like in the third act, he's like dancing with them. And I'm going, what? Why is this happening? This makes no sense other than to be convenient for a musical. And that sort of exemplifies the type of musicals that I despise. While South Park, it can be a cartoon and it can do more like kind of like parody stuff that's not believable with the music, and it works fine. But I mean, La La Land, yeah, I loved that movie. And Moonlight never, like, I saw it like maybe 3 times, and it never really left an impression on me. It felt more like a checklist for Oscar movies. Like, okay, we need to have a gay relationship. We need to have racism. You know, we need to have a upbringing, and they just check it off the list. And then they're like, and they got their Oscar, and great, good for them. But I mean, that movie didn't quite live up to me, but this one still does, not only because it's hilarious, but because it's eternally relevant. You know, it's something that you can always include in the public stratosphere, because we're always going to be struggling with censorship, and we're always going to be struggling with people who take things too far because they think they're doing the right thing, and kids will always be perceptive. But I mean, yeah, Trey Parker, Matt Stone are great because they're 2 guys in Hollywood who don't like Hollywood. They just want to tell funny stories, and they don't care if it even leads to like they're one of their own leads leaving the show, or if it leads to like some of their old Hollywood buddies like George Clooney, who like originally came on the show to like literally just bark like a dog for 1 episode. And then he came on to actually play like the doctor that's reminiscent of his ER role. And then, you know, they had the Smug Alert episode where his Oscar speech is coming in the air, and, you know, Clooney didn't talk about that after that. But it shows like they're not trying to just kiss ass and show loyalty. They're really trying to have social commentary that excites them as writers and keeps things going. And that's why I think South Park is really outaged, you know, all the other cartoons that we've mentioned, and why this movie still is great. Like it's from 99, and it's not like Austin Powers. You're like, oh, what's that reference to in there? I don't really understand it. Or like date movie or epic movie. You know, it's really something that's clever and has heart to it. And it's not just fart jokes, where Terrence and Phillip, that was a response to the fart jokes, because a lot of critics at the time said, oh, South Park, that's just dumb fart jokes and crass humor. And then Trey Parker and Matt Stone created Terrence Phillip, and they're like, no, this is dumb fart jokes and tasteless humor. And it just shows how they're willing to laugh at themselves, but also how to prove a point and shoot everyone down, because they can make an episode in like 7 days or 6 days or something like that. So they're pretty much invincible, and they don't give a shit who they piss off.
The movie, like you said, it's like this perfect mix of vulgarity but substance with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in some respects too, I think Terrence and Phillip may have been a little bit of a nod to Monty Python at the time, which when that first came out was ripped asunder. I mean, I remember Cleveland Amory, who used to do the TV Guide reviews each week, thought it was a terrible show and immature, and ripped it for a lot of those kinds of immature things. But they don't realize that people are doing that to make fun of it. And I think there's a little bit of that in Terrence and Phillips, because they have the auspices of sounding a little bit more elegant. I mean, they're both doing sort of that mid-Atlantic accent from the 30s and 40s, you know, like, well,
hey, guy,
you know,
my buddy, guy.
Yeah, which is very funny. So it works on a number of levels. By the way, before I forget, just to let you know where they did have to draw the line to get the rating they wanted. The story was, I think it's true, I've read it backed up a couple times, but then again, I wasn't in the room, so I can't say for certain. But apparently there were 2 things they had to cut to get that R rating. One was, I think, when Saddam Hussein, they said when Saddam Hussein is shaking that dildo. Originally, he wasn't shaking it as a dildo, because it's shaped and looks like a cutout photo of a penis. That it was him shaking his penis. So they said, well, what if we make it into a toy, a dildo? And then, okay, that's all right. But when he was shaking his real thing at the devil, like threatening him with the good time, you know, or holding back the good time, the real member was too much. The other one was supposedly the Winona Ryder ping pong joke. The original joke did not have them cut to her
Doing a ping pong show.
doing a ping pong thing. It just left it all to the imagination. And I guess Parker and Stone argued, wait a minute, we don't show anything. It's just the shocked faces of everybody. And everybody knows the famous stories from ladyboys or the Thai hookers that they've heard for 50 years, blah, blah, blah. They're inferring it themselves because truly it's not written dirty. It's just theirs. Let me show you my ping pong junk. And then they're like that, right?
Yeah.
But they said, well, people know that and it's inferred and blah, 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 blah. So they cut to her literally hitting the ping pong paddle. And that's how they got around that one.
Yeah. And Paramount originally like wanted Trey Parker and Matt Stone to make it a PG-13 film. They like literally had like a presentation that was like this corny thing in front of them where like one of the heads from the studio was acting like this dumb actor where they're like, if you make a PG-13 movie, you can have this many numbers. Really? I didn't know that. And their whole point was to make an R-rated comedy, and they were validated in the results in the end. Because if this was a PG-13 film, it would have been another Beavis and Butthead Do America or the Forgettable Simpsons live action movie. It would have been one of those. And it's not. It's actually something that lives on through the test of time that you don't see in a lot of other writers because, frankly, they're just not as talented or brave as Trey Parker, Matt Stone are. And also, we should credit, because we credited her before the podcast, but not during it. When they cut to the credits, they say Pam Brady, who's one of the writers. She actually kind of got Trey and Matt to make their first movie together, which was Cannibal the Musical. And then she wrote for like 3 or 4 seasons of South Park and left, and also wrote the movie. So if anyone, to all the asshole critics out there who say women aren't funny, there's an example for you right there that you're wrong. But moving on. So this movie was it went up to using 399 swear words because the MPAA would have given the film an NC-17 rating if it was at least 400 words if it was used in the film. Yeah. So they literally wrote, and movies like Casino, that has like 800 F-bombs in it. And it's funny, like, when we watch the movie.
Nora has the record now, actually.
Nora?
That or the Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah, it's either that or the Wolf of Wall Street.
Okay, wow.
And I think the MPAA has relaxed on some of that now. I mean, the NC-17 rating is really only handed out for sexual content. It really doesn't become a problem anymore. They just will tell the filmmaker, hey, you got to go back and cut this out. It's too violent.
Yeah. And the MPAA has like made a lot of movies NC-17 throughout the years. I think
actually
Cliffhanger had
it. Well, I mean, they
tried to, but they had to go back and fix it.
That's their card they play to get them to go back and cut some stuff to get it to an R.
Yeah, happened to RoboCop.
I don't think there's been more than 10 movies that have been released with an NC-17. Usually they take the non-rating. Like, well, we'll do it without a rating, which is the way of saying, I know it's a nice loophole, but you do it if you can get it. Blue is the Warmest Color was a famous movie from about a decade ago that did that. It was a French love story between two women, and very explicit, very mature, very adult. Wonderful film in many respects, but they, I think, released that unrated because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to advertise it in papers, and nobody wants that NC-17 rating. It's kind of a kiss of death.
Yeah, I was actually going to use those exact words. If you look at Showgirls, for instance,
yes,
Paul Verhoeven thought that was going to be a big hit, and instead it was a big joke. Where I think he later apologized for like praising his own film or something like that. And, it led to the, I don't remember the name of the main girl. She was from Saved by the Bell and she was the main stripper in it.
Elizabeth Berkley.
Thank you. Yeah. That led to sort of like the end of her career, and NC-17 is something where you're screwed. You're not going to make a lot of money, but there's always the unrated DVD cuts, but now we don't have that, but you can have streaming cuts. But unfortunately, as physical media has proved, there are episodes of South Park that if you have the DVD, you still have it. But if you have Paramount Plus or HBO Max, you're not going to get those anymore, which is really unfortunate. And yeah, I mean, and it's funny when I think about South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, it really kind of brings me back to the old days of going to movie theaters where a film wouldn't really be available on video for a while. And if it was just through a crappy VHS. And also it was around the time DVDs were coming out. And, you would go to the theater and share like a comedy together. And the theater I went to was like empty when I saw it. But like I could imagine the theaters that people went to, sort of like when they see the Jackass movies or Borat, it's just there's nothing more infectious than a full theater full of laughter. And it's one of those like kind of like one of those last movies that really has that quality, because it's hard for people to get to films now. Like if you want to see Lilo and Stitch, the remake, instead of just seeing the original cartoon and seeing it for free on Disney Plus, you're going to waste like $50 by paying 18 plus tax per ticket, plus concessions, maybe a little less because kids' tickets are less. But, we don't live in that kind of golden era of cinema that, we had during 99, and 99 was an incredible year for movies. You had The Matrix, you had this film, it's not a very good movie, but it was a big deal at the time, The Phantom Menace. We don't have that much anymore. It takes people a lot of effort to go to the theater.
I like what you said about that, because we don't have many comedies in theaters anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many movies or genres that just don't get released in theaters anymore. And it's frustrating because not everything needs to be a tentpole movie. Not everything needs to be released on streaming.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these movies can make money.
Yeah.
And
a lot of the thinking,
you said the Disney remake for Lilo and Stitch, that's on track to make like $1 billion already. And for a while, Disney was releasing these movies without making any money, like just sending them to Disney Plus, and it's like, why? So I do think like comedies, especially if you make them, put them in theaters, and make them funny. That's the most important part. They can make money again.
Yeah, they really can.
It's funny because I think they think that for a while there, really the early part of this century, there were probably too many comedies. A lot of talk shows, central shows, stand-up specials, and all that. I mean, I feel sorry for the comedy clubs because there's so many comedy specials that come out on Netflix and HBO and Hulu and stuff like that. But I think they still do well enough. But if there is an oversaturation of comedy, I think it actually begets more comedy in a larger measure. The same way that, when people were fearful that TV was going to rob the movie theaters of audiences, it actually did the exact opposite. People got used to watching screens and they wanted to watch more. So, but to your point, Rob, it's funny, comedy as far as films go are in such a dumpster of a place right now. There's very few comedies, and I mean, romantic comedies, I mean, those are almost extinct in a large degree. But they will work, but you have to reinvent them in a way. Like 500 Days of Summer was a really good romantic comedy. Now, grant you, that's closing in on probably 20 years ago, but still.
Mark Webb's only good film.
But to Rob's point, I think movies have gotten into a place now where they figure, well, if people are going to go to the movie theaters, it has to be something big and all that, but it really has to be something that an audience wants to see and seems more unique, and maybe becomes an experience that you laugh and share together. Certainly, Oppenheimer and Barbie did that a couple summers ago. We'll see what's going to happen with this summer. But Lilo and Stitch is going to make $1 billion because it's good. Because it's one of the, for every 10 shitty ones they've made, they'll make a good one that comes along. It does pretty well. But there's no reason they shouldn't be doing more comedies. They can do R-rated comedies for the big screen. And there's good actors who can pull it off. There was a while there. Remember when Jason Bateman and some of those guys,
American Pie,
Owen Wilson, Owen Wilson. Well, they were making quite a few comedies that had a little bit of a adult skew, but there probably were too many of them, and I think they maybe weren't smart enough or as sophisticated as they thought they were. But and then you get people like Tina Fey now, who it's easier for her to go to Netflix and tell a good comedy story over the course of 8 episodes with a remake of The Four Seasons as a TV series. So, maybe that's hurting it too, because television and streaming lets you tell longer narratives, but there's an opportunity for it. Just the scripts have to be smarter and things that people will want to go see. And I think they can make more movies like this. They can make more movies that have really good qualities to them, and then we wouldn't be having that argument.
Yeah, and I like
The
movies
good
that
news is that Trey Parker and Matt Stone are actually it might just be Trey Parker. They do have a comedy in development with Kendrick Lamar. And the premise already sounds hilarious. It was supposed to come out this year, but I don't think that's going to happen anymore.
it's
So,
about Kendrick
yeah,
Lamar. You said.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, Trey Parker and Matt Stone have done a lot of projects that are like successful outside of South Park, and some that didn't work out. I don't know if anybody ever remembers the sitcom That's My Bush, but
Yes.
yeah, it was like it was like a sitcom that bashes sitcom conventionalities. It only lasted like 8 episodes. It didn't
Yeah,
quite
it was like
work.
the goofy dad was George W. Bush in the White House.
Yeah, and then there was like the neighbor who would just come into the house, although it's like the White House, but somebody just bursts in like he's Kramer, like, "Hey, how you doing?" And everyone applauds, and he comes on screen. Like they always do something a little different. Like you can always tell when it's something from them. And we don't have like a lot of comedy tours like that anymore. We have a lot of like generic writers. Like I've worked in a comedy club for many years, and the amount of times comedians just come on stage and they're just like, my dick, my pussy, my dick, my pussy. Like you just hear that constantly, and it's not creative. Yet in South Park, when Chef tells Stan, "Oh, you just got to find the clitoris," and then throughout the whole movie, he's trying to find the clitoris, and then eventually he finds like a gigantic godlike version of one. It's like that's crass, and it's talking about genitalia. But it's funny because it's about kids who don't understand that stuff.
But they also put other jokes around it. A lot of
Yeah.
those comedians that you're talking about, their whole thread is about dating, and I'm a sad sack and I don't know my way around a woman, or the woman who's disappointed in the men that she's dating, and it turns into an X-rated spiel. But the thing about South Park is that's just one of the sacred cows they go after, but they go after 100 others.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great that no one's safe. I mean, it's funny. They like really predicted how many Hollywood people were crazy. Like I remember when Passion of the Christ came out, everyone was arguing if it was anti-Semitic or not. And they depicted Mel Gibson as this crazy person who runs around with his shirt off, smearing his feces against buildings. And then it turns out he really is kind of that crazy in real life. And we found out Tom Cruise is really kind of crazy in real life. Like Alec Baldwin shot someone. Like, well, he didn't do it intentionally, but he's
I'm not sure that's the same connection, but
we find
point
out
taken, Mike, that they're making fun of people that a lot of people wouldn't have made fun of before, and maybe they know something, or maybe they want to bring those sacred cows down too. But
yeah, well, they just hate political culture or celebrity culture. We're obsessed with it, and I'm part of that problem. Sometimes I'll watch an interview with someone because I'm like, oh, I bet he's nice, when really they're probably acting nice, But I'm sorry, I keep cutting people off. I gotta stop doing that.
No, it's all right.
I mean, the one song that like a lot of people liked it and became a classic, but I didn't think really pushed the narrative along was "What Would Brian Boltano Do?" Like a lot of people like that one, but I'm just kind of like, what's this doing here? This is like some Family Guy shit. But then, I don't know if you guys ever saw the pilot to South Park, but it was The Spirit of Christmas, and it was where Jesus and Santa fought each other, and they even go after religion in so many ways. It's so great. And it's great because it's subversive comedy, but it's not subversive for the sake of being subversive. It's actually social commentary that's not haphazardly done, and it's done by two guys who really aren't a part of the system that they're in. They have like a combined net worth, I think, of like $1 billion, but they're these two guys from Colorado who I think are in more touch with regular people than most of Hollywood is. And that pretty much shows. And that's why this movie has been so fun throughout the years. We have some comments on here, or really just like one person writes, "Yummy." He must have been thinking about the clitoris.
Good Lord.
And then Uncle Fluffer, which that is a position in Hollywood, in porno films, to I don't know if you guys know what a fluffer is, but let's just say you get the actor prepared before you start rolling. So yeah, but I think we talked long enough about this movie. We are going to quite exceed its length. It was hour 21 minutes, but it was a solid hour 21 minutes. Do you guys have any closing thoughts on South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut?
That's actually something I wanted to mention. I forgot that the movie, it's not trying to be too long. It's not trying to be like a 2-hour full-length movie. It's like barely 75 minutes without credits. It gets in, it gets out, just knows what it's doing effectively.
Yeah, that's what most animated films did, because
That's
they're way
true
more
too.
hard to, like Nightmare Before Christmas is barely like an hour.
Well,
20.
I think the Simpsons movie is like close to 2 hours, though. I can't remember.
Yeah, the 70-minute time period is generally considered the amount of time that a child can watch a movie and not start to get antsy, especially with a cartoon. Disney's longer live-action films, the ones with Kurt Russell in the 60s and 70s, they got a little bit longer, but those are more family skewed, where cartoons forever and a day seem to always be thinking that they were mostly aimed at children, which they're not. They're aimed at family, because somebody has to sit there with the child. And so it better be appealing to the adult who's the parent or the guardian. And that's the same with television shows that are cartoons as well. But you're right, Rob. This was very smart on every level. It didn't outstay its welcome. It really made the songs really good songs, whether it was for a comic, a cartoon musical or not, and kept the best parts of South Park's television series, and yet expanded it for the screen, which is really an important and big part of its success, I believe.
Yeah. And the funniest thing is, they thought their show was going to get canceled, and the movie ended up sort of saving it. Although they were also doing the 3rd season of South Park at the same time. So they were literally running between buildings, doing both. But yeah, I mean, talk about a movie that, you can think of other films from that decade or other animated feature versions of movies. Like, who's talking about the Aqua Teen Hunger Force feature film? Nobody remembers that shit. But we remember South Park.
Did that even make it to theaters?
I don't know. I don't remember.
There's one I will defend, just as you're saying that, is for fans of The Dark Knight, they still talk about Batman Mask of the Phantasm. That's still up there by most of
That's a great movie.
It's a great, I still think it's one of the top, if maybe not the top Batman movie, despite the fact that, that's from the animated series. Well, the animated series, I think, is still the best personification that Hollywood has done of Batman. And that movie was one of its crown jewels.
Yeah. Before Batman Begins, that was like the Batman movie in theaters that was actually about Batman and not the villains. And that's why it works so well. And it personified that character very well. And I think because it was a cartoon, they could be like more fun, comic-y with it without, kind of falling into the whole 60s Batman complete camp value,
and they also didn't put any nipples on the costumes, which Joel Schumacher felt the need to do in the 90s.
That's going to follow him to his grave. And I got to feel
he's
bad.
already dead. So
he's already dead.
Yeah,
I know.
I think they buried him in the nipple costume that Clooney always talks about. So.
Poor Joel Schumacher, man. Like, he's made some okay movies. I thought 8mm was decent. Falling Down is pretty good.
Cousins.
Cousins. Yeah. But then, the problem was he made a Batman movie where he was literally yelling to the crew, like, remember, this is a comic book. And that's not quite the way, like, Tim Burton approached it a little bit like a comic book, but it had to be dark and serious, like the Frank Miller Dark Knight Returns.
What they forget is, and the whole reason why him going into that, for that taking Batman there to lighten it up, was silly, because in the 60s, when they did the Batman TV series, everything was counterculture, everything was being laughed at, and it was very much the youth movement laughing at that. It was a satire. I mean, that show was a satire like Man Magazine was, and they were very hip and happening at the time, and it was very cool. And then he thinks, well, that's the version of the lighter version that we need. It's like, no, that was a satire. What Burton did was actually much closer to the comic books. And I think those movies have stood up pretty well, considering, but Phantasm even looks better because it's a great story, great villain, albeit not the focus of it. And Batman and Bruce Wayne are front and center, and they're very well done.
Yeah. And then Christopher Nolan came in, and as Roger Ebert put it, it's like, this is the Batman movie I've been waiting for and hoping for, and I finally got. Weird thing about the Dark Knight trilogy, real quick, is like Batman's only Batman for like a year and a half. It's like a phase for him. And then he's just kind of like, oh, I went through that. Well, now I'm gonna live with Catwoman, who like got me nearly killed. But see you guys. Oh, hi, Alfred. But I mean, I digress. I still love that trilogy. No one's ever going to be able to top what Christopher Nolan did. I mean, Matt, whatever the hell his name is, the guy who did the Planet of the Apes reboots.
Matt Reeves.
Matt Reeves, yeah. He certainly made a kind of intelligent Batman movie. Like, Batman's supposed to be a detective, but he doesn't know what a Tucker is, and the Riddler so clearly lays it out for him. And like the riddles aren't even like that clever in the movie, but the movie's like stylistically like very operatic and maybe too serious. It's like so dark. I literally can't see what's on the screen when I'm watching the movie. Yet it's pretty brilliant. But yeah, we kind of went off on a tangent, but that's because Trey Parker and Matt Stone are like a huge fan of this stuff. They're a huge fan of Star Wars. They certainly nailed it with the member berries. I guess if I have one final question, if South Park were to finally end, do you think they'd make another movie, or would they just like make an episode and kind of retire or move on to other projects?
Well, lately they have been making like sort of movies, but not really movies on Paramount Plus. So I think they would just continue to do stuff like that. I don't think they'd ever do like a full movie again.
I agree.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a good idea. It's like you were on a high note. You don't want to ruin that with more.
Yeah,
sequels.
if the show ended today, like they would have a pretty good legacy there.
They would. Yeah, they would. They wouldn't wind up like The Simpsons did, which that's unfortunate because it was such a brilliant show in its early seasons. And then it's been bad for like 20 years now. It's just mind blowing how it's still on the air.
Sometimes I'm shocked it's still on the air and that they're making new episodes.
Yeah, who's writing this shit? Like, how is it still on the air? But I digress.
Fox doesn't have any other shows.
Yeah, exactly. And funny thing is, Comedy Central doesn't really have any other shows now. They used to have stand-up comedy specials all the time. But now it's just constant Office reruns that are on that channel and like nothing else almost. And Comedy Central really once they lose South Park, they're going to want to hold on to that thing until Matt and Trey are dead. They don't want to let it go, just like how they zombified The Daily Show, where like they had to bring Jon Stewart back because like he tried to do his own sort of Daily Show. It didn't work out. And now he only does anchors on like Mondays. And then when anyone else comes on, the audience just probably doesn't care. Trevor Noah, he did an okay job, but you can't really follow up Jon Stewart because it's like if the South Park writers try to have other writers write the show. It wouldn't work out. They tried that for season 2. And then after season 2, they realized, okay, this new one got our show canceled. We're never doing that again. They're very hands-on with each of the projects that they do. And that's what makes them work so very well. But yeah, guys, thank you for coming on. You can check out Rob Kojder at the Flickering Myth. And you can check out Jeff York at theestablishingshot.org. And if you see that little see more option in the video, that'll just give you like all their social links and stuff. Don't be lazy. Just read it. Reading's good. You could be like, oh God, now I'm thinking of the chicken fucker episode. But yeah, guys, thanks so much for coming on. And don't blame Canada. We love Canada. And I don't think Canada loves us back anymore. Yeah, blame America. Well, I wonder if Trey and Matt ever wrote a song called Fuck America. They did one in Book of Mormon called Fuck God. So, yeah. All right, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks.